Hello, everyone. My name is Gaurav Dingrolia, and I have done some research on Equifax data breach. Let's get started. Okay, let's have a quick overview of Equifax data breach. Um, the Equifax data breach was among the biggest data breaches in the world. It started on 13th of May and ended on July 29th, rather July 30th. So it was almost around 76 days for which the data has been stolen. And it was a huge data, like 182,000 dispute documents, 209,000 credit card numbers, and many other personal data like home addresses, birth dates, and driver license number. Uh, Almost around 148 million US citizen was exposed to this breach, including 19,000 Canadian and 15 million British citizens. It was around 44% of the US population which was impacted with this breach. So let's see how that happened. Equifax was using Apache Strut in its online dispute portal, the ACIS system, where the Apache Strut was having vulnerability. Apache Software Foundation released the security patch for the Apache Strut on 7th of March, and urge all the user to update the patch immediately. Equifax run the scans and couldn't identify any vulnerability, so they didn't update the security patch. Hackers used this opportunity and gained the access to the internal servers of the Equifax corporate network. Hackers first pull the data of the Equifax employee, the credentials, and then utilize those credentials to monitor the credit databases and steal all the data. They used the encryption to mask their searches and performed almost around 99,000 scans of the databases to extract the information and export the data from the Equifax servers. After the renewal of SSL certificate by the Equifax security department team, they could observe the suspicious activity, and then they brought down the ACIS system, the application itself. So this is how it happened. Let's see that on the timeline. So on 14th of February, Apache product management committee received the report about the vulnerability. Then they worked on that and released a patch on 7th of March. On 8th of March, US CERT sends Equifax an alert to particular vulnerability to patch that. On 9th of March, Equifax internally communicated to the responsible department or the person. On 15th of March, they run the scan but couldn't find the vulnerability, so they didn't update the patch. On 13th of May, finally, the hackers uh, made the entry to the Equifax network after long exploration, but then they continued till 30th of July. On 29th of July, the Equifax team updated or renewed the SSL certificate, and they could then monitor the suspicious. They observe the suspicious activity and block the IP. Then on 30th, they again observe another activity, and then they uh, uh, takes the ACIS application offline. And 31st, they found that there are a lot of personal PII that have been exfiltrated. So this was on the timeline. Let's see what were the issues. There were some organizational issues and governance issues within Equifax. The Equifax IT management structure lacked the accountability and coordination. So the CIO and CSO structure resulted in the split of the IT operational security and responsibility that created the gap, accountability gap. And the communication and coordination between these two groups were often inconsistent. that led to the non-update of the patch. Equifax had serious gaps between the IT policy and development execution as well. So they were having this patch management policy in place, but there was no designees for this. So, I mean, there was the gap between these two departments. Uh, Another example of disconnect was certificate management process. The company was distinctly aware it lacked the a process for updating SSL certificate. And then Equifax was running their business critical system on legacy systems like ACIS, and they were knowing about this risk and vulnerability it has in the system. Now let's see what was the root cause. So Apache strut vulnerability was the source of the initial intrusion. We all know that now. Vulnerability was located in the ACIS system. That was a legacy system. The security and IT team were made aware about the need of the of updating the patch, but they and that was supposed to be done within 48 hours because it was classified as the critical patch. But Equest didn't patch the vulnerability and until the discovery of the breach. Uh, while the roles and responsibility were defined in the policy, there were no official designees for these roles. So I would say if we understand the root cause, it's the faulty patch management policy or the lack of accountability and compliance effort in the execution of the patching process. Let's see what is the outstanding or immediate vulnerability. So CVE 2017-5638 was the vulnerability that was identified as the root cause. Attackers exploited that vulnerability and found on the ACIS system of Equifax. Equifax were having the monitoring system, but the device that monitors the traffic was running on expired SSL certificate, and the IDS and IPS system cannot analyze the encrypted traffic flowing to and from the internet. So the immediate vulnerability which I see is the expired SSL certificate, because of which I mean, and in the default setting of that device, it continued the traffic to come through the system. Of course, the vulnerability system or the software was the ACIS system. It was a standard three-tier architecture comprised of web server, application server, and the databases. Equifax misstep in the response to the breach. Of course, they blocked the internet IP address of the through the internet service provider after identifying this suspicious activity, but they took another day to completely shut down the ACIS application when they noticed another suspicious activity. So while they have used one of the containment tactics, which is like blocking the IP address, but there are many containment tactics which we have learned in module 12, like blocking the attacker's entry with an emergency security patch, blocking malware entry through a vulnerability, then blocking exfiltration of data through emergency change order, and then hackers setting the hacker's IP address as null or black hole route. So this could have been done. Now, recommendation on the incident response. If I would have been there, I would have used the incident response framework, mostly the NIST framework, where I would have prepared for the incident response and detection and analysis I have done, then containment, eradication and recovery, and then finally the post-incident activities. While I mean, if we talk about the containment step only, then I would have blocked the entry, attacker's entry with an emergency security patch first, and the exfiltration of the data through emergency change order. So this would have been done, and I feel is a mess in the incident's response. That had lead to more damage. So then some steps that could have prevented the breach or at least lessen the impact. So as per the best practices for the secure network administration, Equifax were already having parameter defense or defensive solution like intrusion detection system, intrusion prevention system, firewall, and also they have one own application which monitors the traffic on the network. However, they couldn't have implemented the defensive security strategy by utilizing the uh, five function, or they could have implemented the NIST framework. They could have implemented the defensive solutions like principle of least privilege and privilege separations. Then they could have used the IAM, which is identity and access management. They could have deeply utilized the defense in depth strategy. Then they could have used the cryptography to encrypt their databases. So even if somebody breached, they couldn't have read the data. Then they could have done the network segmentation because they have the legacy system, which is kind of a vulnerable system, and they must be having some critical systems, including these legacy systems. So network segmentation is something they should have done. While they were having the monitoring of network traffic, there are a lot to do from the security point of view. They could have utilized the CM, which is security incident and event management. There are many tools which they could have used. Then incident response framework. This is a whole process, and it's not about when we actually come across the breach, then only we should respond to that. So it start from the preparation. We should follow all the NIST incident response framework, and there are testings like vulnerability testing, penetration testing. Often those are the offensive strategy. So those could have also been utilized to prevent the data prevent the breach. So I would say this should have been done by the Equifax, but unfortunately that's not the case. What lesson we have learned from the breach? So vulnerability and patch management it's very important then that we patch every on regular basis, and we also do the vulnerability testings. Then the certificate management, we should have an alert generated system when a certificate is expired. Then it should be renewed as soon as possible. There should be a governance process for this as well. Then legacy system, it's okay to utilize the legacy system in case if we cannot avoid that, but it should be protected. Immense protection should be taken care for these systems. They can be put on a different network altogether. So yeah, network segmentation can be done for the critical system. Then the principle of least privileges, this should be done. Those it should not be like everything should be available to every person. It should be on the need basis. Then uh, endpoint and host monitoring, so that if anybody modify, create, and copy files, it should get alerted. Um, then there should be incident response plan. Definitely, it always start from the planning and not at the time of the breach. Then offensive testings like red team testing, vulnerability testing, and penetration testing should be utilized to assess our own defensive strategies. So these are the lessons which we have learned from the Equifax data breach, and all the organization should implement these and should take care of these best practices point from security perspective. Thank you.